Hi, I'm Carrie Heron, and this is A Ripple Effect, a program that takes us from the campus of the University of the West Indies out into the community to showcase UWI research and projects that are changing lives and offering hope. Today we turn the spotlight on an institution in the Faculty of Medical Sciences dealing with the most sensitive and often misunderstood topic, the matter of our mental health.
Mental illness is something which we come face to face with unknowingly, more often than we realize. Not just the obvious cases, but in our loved ones, our neighbors, our colleagues, even our children, who may be suffering from personality disorders, anxiety, depression, and a range of other conditions. Mental health, the stigma and the reality. Our focus on this week's Ripple Effect.
My guest today is Professor Frederick Hickling, renowned psychiatrist and Professor of Psychiatry at the University of the West Indies. Professor Hickling is also the Executive Director of the Caribbean Institute of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. Welcome, Professor.
One love, daughter.
Tell me, what is mental health?
Mental illness is about any kind of behavior which causes the individual or people around them or the social environment some kind of pain and disruption. In the main, that's what mental illness is. So mental health, by extrapolation, is the absence of behavior that produces pain and real difficulty for the individual and the people around them and the social environment.
How misunderstood is this term in our society generally?
It's really a big problem because most people are really not clear about what mental illness is and the range of mental illnesses that you have, because when you ask people in this context what is a madman, they said somebody who is in a garbage pan, who is wandering around taking off the clothes on the street, who is violent and dangerous. But of course, we're talking about 3 to 4% of the society. We have one of the highest murder rates in the world. Yeah, our latest figures is that it's about 40 to 45 per 100,000. Normal societies have the murder rate is under 5 per 100,000. So we are really in an excessive area, and that's due to the issue of personality disorder, which is another mental illness, which is something that you don't see. In other words, you can't tell when somebody walking on the street that they have a personality disorder. However, when somebody overtakes you in a line of traffic, and is driving on the other side of the road at 100 miles an hour, that's the time when that behavior, abnormal behavior, you can begin to spot the person who has that kind of sociopathic, psychopathic personality disorder.
What percentage of people in Jamaica actually do suffer from mental?
Psychosis is about 3 to 5%. The next major illness that you have in mental illness, it's called anxiety and depression. And that's about 15 to 20% of people in the society. Now, anxiety and depression are conditions that the individual knows about. If you have anxiety, I'll never know unless you tell me. But it's a very serious problem because it prevents you from doing things, it causes you pain, and it causes trouble for the people who are around you. Then the other major mental illness that you have is what's called a personality disorder. And our research here at the University of the West Indies, we identified very clearly that personality disorder has really 3 characteristics. The first one is that people constantly are in conflict. They have a great deal of difficulty in resolving conflict, and almost everything becomes a conflict. The second finding is something to do with psychosexual relationships. And the most common one in this country is called hypersexuality. In other words, where the individual has no governor on the amount of sexual relationships they have with different people. And the third issue is the business of dependency. And there are two types of dependency. There is the psychological dependency, which in Jamaica, this is best explained by the Jamaican concept called lean pan, where you cannot survive on your own. You have to survive on somebody else. And then you have the physiological dependence, which is your dependence on some kind of physical substance, like alcohol, like cocaine, like cannabis. But one of the biggest physiological dependencies in Jamaica is a dependency on food. Now, when you add up these three things together in individuals, you get a personality disordered person. We did studies on the psychiatric unit, on the medical wards, in the population, and we found out that maybe 41% of people in Jamaica have the propensity to have a personality disorder. And there are whole huge other areas of mental illness, such as dementia, which is mental illness in old age. That's about 7 to 10% in the society. In other words, maybe 70 to 75% of us in Jamaica will suffer from some form of mental illness sometime in our lives. And we're not now even talking about the mental illness in children, because the business of mental illness in children is only something that we are recently coming to terms with.
Are Jamaicans more prone to mental illness than any other society?
I don't think so at all. I think that in any society in the world, especially societies where you have had a history of slavery and a history of colonialism, the levels of mental illness are going to be about the same. If you're going to go into somebody's home and steal their land and steal their home and steal their children, something is wrong with you. Sir Henry Morgan was our first governor in Jamaica. He was an Englishman. But he was a pirate. He was a buccaneer. He was a thief and a murderer. And that was the problem. And therefore it was people like him and in his time that set up the society in Jamaica that then led to the development of this high level of personality disorder in our people 300 years later, 400 years later. This brings us to a recent study, another study in science, which is called epigenetics. And this is a study of intergenerational problems. In other words, the things that happen in the father can be passed on to the son and the grandson. Not only is mental illness passed on by things that you learn intergenerationally, but it's also passed on genetically in the brain. And this is a new finding. And that's why the psychiatrists and the psychologists at the present moment have to be putting all their energies in finding a way not only to control the insanity and the mental illness, but to try to prevent it. Because if you can create it intergenerationally, then you can flip it intergenerationally too.
You fashioned your response to the overall epidemic that we have in mental illness in Jamaica with CARIMENSA. How is that playing out?
CARIMENSA, Caribbean Institute of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. It was a group of us who came together which really recognized, listen, how we have treated mental illness in the past is by waiting till the mental illness is there and then you try to cure it and treat it. If it's being caused intergenerationally or by how people behave in the society, then you can prevent it. And therefore, that's how CARIMENSA was formed. And I think CARIMENSA is the only institution of its kind in the world where our stated mission is to create methodologies for the prevention of mental illness.
Thank you, Professor Hickling.
Thank you too. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. and I hope we can do something with this material.
We've been speaking with Professor Frederick Hickling, the Executive Director of the Caribbean Institute of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. More when we come back.